Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into one of history's most fascinating, powerful, and truly enduring maritime empires. We are traveling way back in time to the deep south of the Indian subcontinent to unpack the brilliant systems, the strategies, and the incredible artistry of the Chola Dynasty. Just pause and think about that number for a second. Over 1,500 years. I mean, how do you successfully run an empire for that incredibly long? It's a staggering achievement. We're talking about a level of longevity that outlasts almost every other major empire in human history. And the secret? Well, it wasn't just about battles and crowns. It was really about the brilliant systemic foundations they built behind the scenes.
Okay, let's break this down. Here is our roadmap for today. 1. Rise of the Cholas. 2. Masters of administration. 3. The agrarian economic engine. 4. Building a maritime empire. And 5. Bronze, temples, and culture.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, Rise of the Cholas, an imperial timeline. The origins of the Chola dynasty honestly kind of fade into the mists of antiquity. It's wild to think their earliest datable references go all the way back to the 3rd century BCE. They're actually mentioned in the ancient rock edicts of Ashoka the Great of the Maurya Empire. Back then, they were known as one of the 3 crowned kings of the region. But then, there's this massive gap in time. It really wasn't until around 850 CE, so over 1,000 years later, under a leader named Vijayalaya, who took the city of Tanjore, that the imperial Chola era truly exploded onto the world stage as this unified expansionist power. And at their peak, we're talking between the 9th and 13th centuries, legendary kings like Rajaraja I and his son, Rajendra I, they didn't just unite the Tamil-speaking regions, they pushed their grip way beyond their heartland. They stretched across the Bay of Bengal, pushed into Sri Lanka, and essentially created this expansive maritime footprint that entirely redefined the geopolitical map of Asia.
Moving right along to Section 2, Masters of Administration, Central Monarchy meets Local Autonomy. So how exactly do you manage all that territory? Well, to maintain control, the Chola state divided its lands into nested geographic units. It's actually a lot like our modern federal, state, and county systems today. At the top, you had the mandalams, or provinces, which were often governed by royal princes. Those were chopped up into lanadus, basically districts, and then into nadus, or counties. But the real kicker, at the very foundation was the grammum, the village. What made this entire system so incredibly advanced was the local self-government. Village assemblies and elected reps managed their own local affairs, collected their own taxes, and even administered justice with a surprising amount of independence.
Which brings us to Section 3, the agrarian economic engine, funding an empire. Now, all of that administrative and geopolitical muscle we just talked about, it was entirely dependent on a meticulously managed economy. The ultimate source of wealth for the Cholas was the land itself, specifically the super fertile Kaveri River Delta. The main financial pillar was land revenue, with the state demands strictly set at 1/3 of a farmer's gross agricultural produce. But they didn't just guess these numbers. Rulers like Rajaraja I tossed out ad hoc taxation in favor of strict, highly scientific land surveys. They measured and classified land based on soil fertility, access to irrigation, and crop yields. This ensured the assessments were accurate and, more importantly, perfectly fair. It's honestly fascinating to see just how sophisticated and diversified their revenue streams were. So Kadamai was your standard land tax, sure, but they had specialized levies for practically everything else. Ariayam specifically funded the maintenance of irrigation tanks, meaning the infrastructure basically never decayed. Vedi mobilized communal labor for massive public works. They even, and I love this detail, had a highly specific tax for shepherds called atukari, literally a sheep tax. This massive, diversified revenue engine is what reliably funded their sweeping infrastructure, those huge armies, and their ever-expanding navy. But they weren't just ruthless tax collectors, right? They were deeply clever economists. Picture this, a Chola farmer whose land near the Kaveri River has just been completely devastated by seasonal floods. To incentivize that struggling farmer to reclaim and actually cultivate that ruined land, the state offered what they called a gradual assessment. Instead of demanding the full tax right away and crushing them financially, they charged just 25% the first year, then 50% the second, 75% the third, and they only hit that full 100% in year 4. It was a brilliantly designed grace period that allowed farmers to rebuild, thrive, and ultimately expand the empire's agricultural base. And all that wealth and labor literally transformed the environment. By using that Vedi communal labor system we just mentioned, the Cholas engineered massive tanks, canals, and embankments all along the Kaveri River. They physically sculpted the landscape to prevent those devastating floods and dramatically boost crop yields. This created a thriving, incredibly stable agrarian core.
All right, moving to Section 4, building a maritime empire, the Chola Lake. Once the land was secure and thriving, the Cholas looked outward. Under the totally visionary leadership of Rajendra Chola, they pivoted from mastery of the land to absolute dominance of the sea. They essentially transformed the vast Bay of Bengal into what historians actually call a Chola lake. And they pulled this off through a total technological revolution. You see, traditional naval battles of the era relied on heavy vessels, brute force, and ship ramming. The Cholas completely changed the game. They utilized fast scout ships for intelligence gathering, they developed far superior ship designs for quick maneuverability, and they introduced fire arrows for devastating ranged attacks. All of this allowed them to systematically conquer maritime choke points from Sri Lanka all the way to the Malacca Strait. But Rajendra Chola totally understood that pure military muscle is never enough, right? True maritime hegemony requires commercial cooperation. So, they integrated their military with powerful Tamil merchant guilds like the Ayavole and Manigramam, and forged vital alliances with Arab merchants. In exchange for tribute and strategic intelligence, the Chola Navy offered these merchants protection. It was a pioneering model of naval commercial integration. It generated immense wealth by controlling international trade routes rather than just blindly conquering them. And finally, Section 5, Bronze, Temples, and Culture, the Dravidian Legacy. So what exactly happens when a highly organized society amasses staggering agrarian wealth and controls the world's most lucrative maritime trade routes? Well, they pour it into a massive cultural renaissance. Among their most celebrated achievements are their bronze sculptures, which are widely considered the absolute pinnacle of Indian metal art. The secret to their incredible lifelike detail was the cire perdu, or lost wax casting technique. Artisans would create a perfect wax model, encase it in clay, melt the wax away, and then pour in molten metal. The result? Completely solid, exquisitely detailed bronze masterpieces that still demand absolute artistic reverence today. But why were they making so many of these heavy, solid bronzes in the first place? Well, during the 10th century, religious concepts started to evolve. Deities were no longer expected to just sit immobile in the dark inner sanctum of massive stone temples. The gods needed to be on the move. They needed to participate in public festivals and daily rituals, just like human monarchs. Think of it almost like a massive modern-day parade where the guest of honor actually comes out to greet the people. This demanded mobile, highly sensuous statues, which led directly to the creation of iconic figures like Shiva Nataraja, the cosmic dancer. From pioneering a tiered democratic administration and rolling out scientific tax incentives to dominating global trade routes with an advanced naval commercial ecosystem, the Chola dynasty was just remarkably ahead of its time. Which leaves us with a pretty fascinating question to ponder. When we look at our own local governments and modern global shipping networks today, how much of our current world is still echoing the innovations of this ancient 1,500-year-old empire? It is an incredible legacy to consider. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep exploring.